Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a Good Life webinar on microboards. I think this is the third session that we've had this month on planning for a good life for our young people as they sort of transition to adulthood and life after school. It's so wonderful to see some familiar faces and names here in the room, as well as lots of new people. You're all very welcome, and I want to say to all of you, what an amazing thing to do on a Tuesday night. It's been a bit chilly here in Victoria today, but to be here spending time listening and learning and thinking about what you can do to set up your young person with disability for a good life into the future. Give yourself a pat on the back for doing that. And to all of the parents in the room tonight, you're absolutely fabulous. For those I don't know, my name's Karen Dimmock, and I'm lucky enough to be the CEO of ACD. And I would like to start by acknowledging that wherever we are across Australia tonight, we're all on Aboriginal land. I join you from the Wadawurrung land near Geelong, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I acknowledge the beautiful care for country that has gone on for thousands of years. So, for those of you who don't know ACD, we are the advocacy service for children with disability and their families here in Victoria. We were established by an amazing group of parents, a bit like all of us, 40 years ago, and we really walk in their footsteps and work to provide families with information, with free workshops like this, with our over-the-phone advocacy service to help families advocate for their children and their family as a whole. We're absolutely delighted tonight to be joined by Jaquie Mills from Microboard Australia, and Eva joins Jaquie as well. Thank you, Jaquie, for being here. I think we're all really interested in learning more about microboards and the work that you do. And I guess I just want to say to families, this can be an emotional topic, can't it? Sort of thinking about the future and what it might hold for our children and their life going forward. And we just really appreciate you presenting this information and giving people what some of the options might be. There will be more information available at the end. So if it's feeling a bit emotional or a bit overwhelming, there's definitely time to come back to it. But listening and learning is always the first step, isn't it, as we plan for our kids? So, Jaquie, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen. And Eva and I are absolutely delighted to be here tonight with everyone. So thank you so much for having us. We'll just start by doing a quick introduction. So to tell you a little bit about Eva and myself. So I'm one of the founding members and currently managing director of Microboards Australia, and I actually have 7 kids, but my eldest son has complex support needs, including complex communication needs, and he's had a microboard for the last 15 years, and that's been a real game changer for us. He has a good life now. He has his own home. He lives with people he chooses to live with. He has some paid work and engages in things that he chooses to engage in, and has a network of friends and has a girlfriend as well. So the microboard's been instrumental in terms of helping to establish all of that and also to maintain it. As well as developing microboards, I engage in other areas in the disability sector, particularly in areas of development in complex communication needs, understanding behaviour and health access, and I currently co-lecture at Curtin University in some postgraduate courses in those specialist areas, although I don't consider myself to be a specialist or an expert necessarily. And Eva's with me tonight too, Eva.
Yes, hi everybody. So my name is Eva, EWA, Polish way of spelling it. So I have been working in disability field through my whole working life. I have 2 children, but none of them have a disability. So I have plenty of friends who do have disability. I migrated to Australia in 2004. and immediately started working in disability field, working for Disability Services Commission as a local area coordinator. I then progressed to become a manager for an area and then for a region. So I traveled across metro as well as a country and provided services there. So I have an extensive experience of the systems in Western Australia. Throughout working in the disability field, I also made a lot of friends with terrific people, parents and people with disabilities, and learned from them a lot. While working, I'm actually a social worker by training, and then while working in WA, I've decided that I would like to learn a bit more about the rights and how that works in Australia. So I actually did masters in human rights in here in WA. In my personal life, through work, probably about 18 years ago, I've met Joe and Dan and became close friends with them. And when the Microboards was introduced to WA through actually Disability Services Commission, I kind of decided to explore that option with Joe and Dan together when Joe decided to set up a microboard for her son. So, and I've been involved in that microboard ever since. We've incorporated 14 years ago, but as I said, we started working on it much sooner. So really my role today is to tell you a little bit about my experience and, you know, how it works, how it worked for us. My accent, it's a bit different, so I don't know, Jaquie or the people who are leading it, if there's an issue, please do flag it with me, but I'm hoping people can understand what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. So, quick overview of what we'll talk about tonight. We'll talk about what is a microboard, who generally joins microboards, what do microboard members do, what do meetings look like, what are the differences between microboards and circles of support, what are the principles of all microboards, what's an example of a microboard, and Eva will be sharing some of Dan's story and some of the things that his microboard have done with him, and a little bit at the end about how we support microboard development. So we'll begin with what is a Microboards Australia microboard. So a microboard is a group of people who meet regularly with a person to help them to have the life they want by supporting them with a range of areas, including plans and making planning and enacting plans, supporting decision making, making sure that people are safe across the course of their life, supporting their health and well-being, supporting people to contribute to others and to their community, and ensuring people are experiencing social inclusion. And the aim of microboards is to maintain quality of life even when parents or other key caregivers are no longer able to. So the microboard is set up and designed to be there for as long as the person needs it. You'll notice that we have a trademark, and I'll just explain briefly why that is. We've only just done that, and we certainly don't believe that we own the microboard model or anything of the sort, but we've found that the terms become very broadly used and used to describe things that are not necessarily what we would think of as being a microboard. So people sometimes now describe any incorporated association set up to support a person with disability as being a microboard. We would say that the microboard model, which we have, which is based on the model developed in British Columbia over the past 40 years, has particular principles underpinning it. And we'll talk about those principles tonight. We're actually the only organisation in Australia who've been trained by Vela Microboards Canada, who have been the main designers and implementer of the model over the last 4 decades, and we're also endorsed by them as delivering the authentic original microboard model that's based on the core principles. So we use the term Microboards Australia Microboard to be clear that we're delivering, and we're talking about a specific model that has particular features which increase the likelihood of sustainability and safety and quality of life for the focus person for whom the microboard has been formed. So it's not to say you can't go off and develop your own microboard without us, you can. It's just to be very clear about the terminology and what it means. So the question most people have is, well, which people become microboard members? Who joins microboards? The first person we'll talk about is who we call the focus person. So that's the person for whom the microboard is formed. That can be a person with disability, a person who has mental health challenges, and a microboard is really a possibility for anyone. There's no actual prerequisite. And in this presentation, though, we'll be talking mainly about microboards for people with disability. Usually the focus person is a member of their microboard, not always, but that's the general practice, is that they're one of the members. So a microboard is a group of usually 6 to 8 people, including the focus person. And those people usually have a relationship with the focus person before they join the microboard and know the focus person well. That's not always possible. And sometimes people don't have enough people in their network with whom they have relationships and who know them really well. So there are times when 1 or 2 microboards members might be people willing to get to know the focus person, and they're good candidates because maybe they have something in common, they share the values. Microboard members also need to be people the focus person has chosen, or maybe if they have complex communication needs, that they're showing that they're happy to have as members of their microboard. And microboard members also need to be over the age of 18 to be members of an incorporated association. A lot of people, when they first hear about microboards, think, right, we need a doctor and a lawyer and an accountant to be on this board. We need people with skills and expertise, and it's a very natural thought to have. But we'd discourage you from thinking that way. The most important thing is that the people on the microboard are people that the focus person likes and trusts, and who have or are willing to commit to creating a good relationship with that person. So we're not looking for the right people. We're not got a list of the ideal microboard member and we're looking for those people. We're actually looking for the right kind of relationships. And when people have the right relationship with the focus person, that makes for a good, strong culture on the board, and it makes for a sustainable board as well. The next question people always ask is, well, where do we find these people? And that part, finding the people, if people are not already having enough connections to form a microboard, is part of the work we do at Microboards Australia, or there are other people around the country who do circles facilitation who are able to assist with that. Generally speaking, microboard members are family members or extended family members, friends of family members, people who used to work with the person, like previous support workers, anyone in the community that the person sees and develops a connection with. If it's not people that the person necessarily knows, it can be people who share the person's interests or their values. And microboards can be and have been built around people with disability who are very isolated and don't have family. And then we need to look for people that have something in common with that person, where there's a likelihood of alignment and connection. Neighbours join microboards, friends of partners or friends, etc. Other people too, but that's a picture of what you'll commonly see on most microboards. So for example, we're talking about Dan's microboard. this evening, and you'll hear more about Dan later. So Eva and I are members of Dan's Microboard, and so are Joe and Shoal. I was actually a friend of Dan's mum first, and it's pretty common for our microboards to begin by being friends of people's parents if the person with disability isn't well connected, and that is okay. We have a vision over time of building connection and relationship with younger people, and Dan's microboard has transitioned now to have more people his age on it. It's different to when it first started, but when it started, it was mainly Dan's mum's friends. Shoal, who is the handsome young fella on the photo on the right-hand side, he used to be Dan's support worker, and he's a long-term member of his microboard now. And Joe, who's on the left of that photo, so Joe with an E, just got to know Dan at a special interest group that Dan attends. There's a photo of Dan's AGM. Dan wanted to have his annual general meeting for his microboard on a bus with fish and chips. So that's what we did, hired a bus and had a meeting on the bus, and Dan thought that was pretty cool. People often ask us why we're cautious about people in paid roles being board members. And there's a few reasons. Firstly, this is about just general good governance. There is always potential, however well-meaning people are, for someone who's in a paid role with a person with disability, so for example, a support worker, to be put in a position where they might need to put their own interests before those of the person with disability. And that's called a conflict of interest. And whether or not people do that, having people like support workers on microboards can be perceived by others as a conflicted thing. So it's not great practice to do that. We've also learned from Vela Canada that having people who are also in paid roles on microboards can risk the long-term stability of the microboard. What we're talking about here is setting up a group, so a small board, that walks alongside a person with disability for the decades to come. That is a big undertaking. We are very fussy about how we set microboards up for that reason, because sustainability is really important, and we've learned a lot from Vela Canada, as well as from our own experience, from the sorts of things that set microboards up to be sustainable and the sorts of things that make them a little wobbly and less likely to see the distance. And so this is one of those things. If a support worker is on a microboard and there's a problem in the paid relationship, there's a risk it will follow over to the microboard and provide sort of two areas of that person's life where stability is jeopardized. So that's another reason. Now, there is no problem with people in paid roles or anyone attending microboard meetings as appropriate and being included in planning and the other work of the microboard. So we're not saying that support workers or paid people can't come and can't be involved, because they can. It's just that it's better if they are not members of that core board, which is usually 5 to 8 people. So people also often ask us, how do we find these people and how do we build a social network? It's something we can help with, but I'll give you a couple of things that we do that anyone can do. The first thing is to start noticing connection if you aren't already. So noticing when people in the person's community or people that they come across in their daily life show interest in them or show some warmth towards them. These are often people with whom there's potential for further connection and relationship, and it's important that everyone is able to notice and support that, including any support workers people have. The other thing that we do is map relationships. So noticing people that the person sees at the places that they go or the activities that they join in, and including everyone in that relationship map. So neighbours or people at the shops. When we do mapping with people, we also include relationships from the past. You might be surprised how many microboard members result from getting in touch with someone that someone used to be connected with but had lost contact with. that can be a good thing to do as well. Most of the people with disability that we work with don't actually have a written list or a map of the connections in their lives. And that's a foundational step to being able to notice potential microboard members, but also to make sure that a person's social network is properly supported. We also talk about making a plan to support relationships. So if we think about all of the things that we all do to build or maintain connections, you know, sending texts and phone calls and social media and birthdays and sharing information and getting gifts and planning to do activities together, even recording a person's contact details. It's a lot to managing a relationship. So we encourage people to make plans for their relationship because a lot of people with disability actually need support to do all of these things in the ways that people typically do when they're forming connections. We also talk about supporting people with disability to plan to deepen these connections. So, for example, if someone has complex communication needs and they're going to see someone in the community that they're interested in and are building a relationship with, maybe they could plan to share a story or bring a photo about what they've been doing lately. Maybe they can plan to ask some questions of the other person to get to know them better. And often, if we're not supporting people to do these sorts of things, they're not happening, and then potential relationships are not forming. So these relationships are really central to microboard development and a big part of the purpose of microboards. So these are good things and helpful things to do. We'll also just say you can do this sometimes, but lots of people go, right, I'm just going to ask people to join the microboard. And we discourage you from doing a direct invitation as the first thing. So going up to someone and saying, I want you to join a microboard. The expectation is that you're going to support my child to have quality of life and you'll be there, you know, for the next 30 years to do that is unlikely to get a positive response. People in the community often need some time to understand what a microboard is and to get their heads around what's involved. And also, we're very careful not to put pressure on people when we invite them and to make it an easy yes and an easy no. So instead of starting with a direct invitation to join a microboard or a circle, you can just start talking about your vision for your family member's life, their strengths and interests, some stories about them. You can talk about how you're planning to build an intentional network around them and what that might look like, and then gauge people's responses and interest leading up to the point where you might invite them to be a microboard member. So just another thing that a lot of us started off by doing was actually just inviting people to a social gathering to get to know the focus person better. So a picnic or a barbecue or something social, which is relationship based, that's a really good start to preparing for a microboard because, as we're hopefully explaining, microboards are very much about relationship and connection. So thirdly, what do microboard members do and what do meetings look like? So microboards have the same roles as other incorporated associations. So there will be a chair or a president, a vice chair or vice president, a secretary, and if the microboard is handling money, then there'll be a treasurer. But at least, you know, more than half of microboards don't handle money, so don't need to have a treasurer. So these are probably familiar roles that you will have heard of. The other things that microboard members do that are important to acknowledge, and I've just got a flyer here that is actually on our website, so you can follow the QR code to our website. We've got a page about what a microboard is, and we've got this flyer that a lot of people actually share this with people when they invite them to come and find out more about microboards or to join a microboard, to give them a sense of what might be involved. So obviously attending meetings and sharing knowledge and experiences in those meetings and ideas, is part of the role. People can also find out more about the person and their community by getting to know the person and learning about their likes and dislikes. It's really helpful if microboard members share their interests and their own skills with the person and explore roles on the microboard connected to those things. That makes the experience of being on a microboard more meaningful and attractive for people, and is also, really helpful and fun thing to do. But we always say to people, the main thing is about being present. So some microboard members just attend meetings and don't find a specific role, but just being present and attending and being interested is actually a really big contribution to people. It can make a real difference in itself. So we're really trying not to put too much pressure on people and letting them find their way when they join a microboard. And we do this because this gives us the greatest chance of sustainability. So this means when we are supporting microboards to form, we call it building from the ground up. So we find out what each member wants to contribute, what their skills and strengths are, and go from there. There's usually someone that's good at taking notes, and clearly a role for them would be taking minutes and doing some of that secretarial role. But we just want to be really clear. Lots of parents need to get their heads around at the start. This is not like having a paid team where we have a list of jobs and we can give them to people and they're going to do them. It's not how this works. We find people, we find what they want to do, and we support them to be able to contribute those things in ways that make sense to them. Once the microboard is formed, if there are gaps, then of course the microboard can problem solve. So that might mean looking for other microboard members with particular skills, or it might mean just finding other ways to meet those needs. And the real strength of a microboard is being a think tank and being able to problem solve and reflect and come up with some different and often innovative ways of doing things. Microboards meet with the focus person regularly, usually every 4 to 8 weeks. And microboard meetings typically involve some social connection. Usually there's some kind of food involved and some reflection on how the person's life is going, some review of the person's plans. Always embedded in everything the microboard does is supporting the focus person's agency and decision making. Microboards will assist with problems or concerns, and often microboards will talk with the person with disability to find out what the best way is for them to let them know if there's something going on in their life that they want some help with. And they're also checking in to make sure the person is mentally and physically safe and well. As for the meetings themselves, they're designed to include the focus person and meet their needs. So we have microboards for a really broad range of kinds of disability and kinds of support needs. And regardless of that, we're always thinking about where works for the person for the meeting to take place. What needs, sensory needs or other support needs, do we need to consider to make sure the environment's going to work for them? There's going to be food and drink, what's going to work for them? How long is a good time for them to be part of the meeting? And a lot of people, when microboards are first joining, just come for a short time and then want to leave because it can feel quite intense. But what we find is over time that people tend to start staying for longer and longer if we're getting it right. My son was one of those people, he'd be there for like 1 minute at the start and then he was out of there. But he stays for the whole meeting now, and our meetings sometimes go for a couple of hours or longer, and he's there the whole time. This is after, 15 years. But that's one of the ways we know that we've got it right for him. We also think about the person's communication needs and making meetings communication accessible and what's involved in that. And some of the work we do is around helping people create visuals. Usually, microboard meetings will start with the focus person giving an update in ways that work for them about what they've been up to. So it might be verbally, it might be photos or videos, using apps, providing a written report. Some people, especially with complex communication needs, might need another person to share information with them. But if another person is doing that sharing, it's always as much as possible from the focus person's point of view and about things that matter to them. This is just an image from my son Eli's last report, and he was supported to create his report by going through photos of all the things he'd been doing, and he chose the ones that he wanted to share. And he's really getting quite passionate about astronomy and space. And so he chose some photos from a space exhibition that he went to, and his supporter noted that he spent a long time looking at photos taken by astronauts, which is a clue for us that this is something he might be interested in. Typically at a microboard meeting, there's a report from the team. So many people have a team facilitator who might prepare that report, or there might be a key worker in the team that prepares that. The topics to be reported on are decided with the microboard, and usually it's things like the person's activities, what progress there's been, how their health is going, how the support team is going, etc., to keep the microboard informed in terms of how that daily on the ground stuff is going. So you can see we in our microboard, Eli's microboard, his team facilitator does a quarterly report, and there's an update there about he has a volunteering role at Fringe Festival every year and really enjoys that. And there's some information about how some health things are going. Eli doesn't mind me talking about the fact that he doesn't like haircuts. And so this particular slide was a big celebration because they've found these hairdressers just down at the local markets, a couple of young fellas, and they've developed a real interest in getting to know Eli. So they've learned some of his signs, they've learned about his communication system, they know that he needs the TV on with some trains and music on when he's at the hairdresser, and they're nailing it. Like, he's successfully having haircuts now because of these young fellas. So that was a really good story to share with the microboard. For many of us, safety is a really important thing, and the regular meetings that microboards have with the person, usually in their home, are a chance for microboard members to check how things are going. And because there's a constitution, they have permission to act if they notice that something is wrong. That's a really important thing for all of us, and especially people who are parents. It's something that we worry about, is who's going to keep an eye on our family member and make sure that they're okay. There is some research about what microboards achieve and what they do. So Professor Cox did a study of some of our microboards in 2018 and found that they were successful in achieving a number of things, including paid employment, more friends, finding a home and purchasing a car for one person, etc., etc. And we can share that research with you, the links to that later if you're interested. There was a big study just done in British Columbia of microboards in British Columbia, which found that microboards have significant impact in terms of outcomes around quality of life. So general well-being, safety, stability, and self-determination, as well as social capital, which is the extent to which people are included in community. So our experience is that people often do want to help. Lots of us families don't experience that in reality. But what we find when we start forming microboards is that people often do want to help, but they just don't know how. And it can also be really hard to be vulnerable as a family and to hold the space lightly when we invite people to help, so that people can safely say no, and that we can be okay if they say no to us. But I guess one of the things we wanted to share with you tonight, some of the things that we support families to do that you can choose to do too if you want to, and you don't need us to help you to do that. You can ask other people to help you, or you can do it off your own bat. But inviting people to come and help, we found those invitations can be done in ways that are more likely to work and feel safe for everyone if they involve an activity and some detail around what might be expected. So, for example, this is an invitation to a busy bee at Sam's place, and invitations to others to help us really need to be specific. What am I being invited to? Time limited. It's from 10 to 1. Involve an activity or role that's likely to appeal. Explicit in a respectful way about how the support needs of the person will be met. So the people being invited expect to support the person or not. You'd be surprised how many people are unsure about that, and makes them anxious, and also no pressure at all. So just, I guess, encourage you to be open to inviting people to support your family and to support your focus person. So many of you will have heard of circles of support. What's the difference between a microboard and a circle of support, I hear you ask? We've got a chart on the screen there that maps this out. They have more in common than they do differences. They're really based on the same principles. We think circles of support are awesome. They're not in competition with each other. The main difference is the level of formality. So microboards have a formal structure and formal roles and are required to keep minutes and to have AGMs, etc. Whereas circles don't have those legal requirements around them, although circles often do those things. Circles of support are absolutely the right model for some people, and microboards are absolutely the right model for others. So they're both good, and they're both based on good things. The main difference between them is that microboards can employ staff like support workers and become the employer who takes on payroll and other legal obligations. And that's because microboards incorporate to become not-for-profit association that supports just one person and have a constitution. People often ask us, why would you incorporate a microboard if you're not going to manage funds and employ staff? And there are actually a few reasons. Being able to manage funds is actually the original reason why microboards were formed back in 1984. They were trying to get people out of institutions. They'd formed circles of support around 3 people in particular to get out of an institution being like a hospital where there's more than 100 people living there. These were really the bad old days. But they couldn't access individualised funding at the time because the government would only pay agencies. So David Weatherow and his wife Faye were the facilitators of those circles, and they came up with the idea of incorporating them to form a disability service organisation that supported just one person. And the model actually worked. The government did provide funding for those microboards so people could get into their own homes and into the community and employ their own support workers. We think microboards are actually the first example of a service for one. And 2 of those 3 microboards, just out of interest, are still going today, 40 years later. One has ceased, but that's just because the focus person passed away. So the model wasn't really developed by David Weatherow after that. It was taken up by Valor Microboards in Canada. And so in British Columbia, there are more than 1,500 microboards today. And the model's been developed under the leadership of Linda Perry, who's the lady in the orange shirt in the photo. And we started developing microboards about 17 years ago in Australia under her mentorship. So back to the question of why incorporate. So one reason was originally around funding, but what people have come to realise over time is that microboards seem to have better sustainability if they don't have a paid facilitator, than informal networks or circles. And this has been experienced primarily in British Columbia, where they have a Microboards organisation. They also have Plan Canada, who have developed a great many circles of support as well. Both of those organisations were developed by the same people. So Alec Mansky and Linda Perry were founders in both of them. So this is not a Microboards are better than circles argument, and there are lots of discussion, and there's lots of circles that last the years, and absolutely. But generally speaking, if circles don't have a paid facilitator facilitating them, seems to be the case that they've got a less chance of lasting for through the decades. And we think that's a result of the legal commitment involved in incorporating to form an association, because people are actually making a formal legal commitment when they join a microboard to do certain things. The other reason is that there seems to be a sense of safety for the person and microboard members. So when people are asked to join microboards, there's a clearly laid out constitution of expectations. What is expected of me here, and what do I have permission to do? There also seems to be less pressure in the sense that there's a natural point each year for people to be able to step off microboards at the annual general meeting. And people with disability tell us that having a legal agreement helps them to feel more secure as well. So there's some reasons to incorporate. I'd like to talk now about the principles. It's one of the reasons we were trademarked. So there's one thing to look at what microboards do, but what is most important is that stuff under the surface of the water that's not so visible, which are the values and principles which underpin all microboards. So there are 4 that are very important: vision and planning, reciprocal relationship, being person-centred, and self-determination. These are at the heart of all of the microboards that we form. So firstly, in terms of having a vision for the focused person's life, there's a vision board there, and some of you might have done a vision board before, and some of you will have done a visioning process, because lots of organisations around Australia that work towards having a good life support families to create visions. But for microboards, they're really important for everyone to be clear about what matters and to have a shared and aligned direction for everyone in the person's network, including support workers, and also to have a decision-making framework. So we start by developing a vision for the focused person, if that's not already been done, to make that firm foundation of what is the actual purpose of this microboard, what are they seeking to achieve across the person's life. Many people find going through a vision process helpful. We have a particular way of doing it, but if you haven't done it before, you can get some help to do one, or have a go yourself with your family member or with a group of people close to them. Have a go at creating a vision board using pictures or words which have meaning for you. It can be a really powerful process to go through, and we certainly find it very helpful for people we support to develop microboards. A second principle is that of reciprocal relationships. So reciprocal relationships are connections where there's mutual exchange and benefit. And this is just to be clear that microboards are not a charity model. We're not looking for good people, to be nice. We're actually looking for people where this is going to be a meaningful role for them, and where they're going to get something from being microboard members. Our belief is that people with disability have a great deal to contribute to others just by being the person they are, and by being supported to share their strengths with other people. And that our community needs people with disability just as much as people with disability need community. This is a really important principle, and I know that lots of us as families can feel when we're asking people to join us on this journey that we're asking something that's hard or that feels uncomfortable, and we really need to turn that on its head and realise that we are offering people a gift. We offer people the opportunity to come in and support our family member with us, that is a gift to them and something that can have real meaning and make a real difference. I'm just going to play you a minute of a video that was made about Dan's microboard and the people in Dan's network talking about the things that Dan has contributed to them, because these are the things that we want to be focusing on.
He really stretches me and just allows me to tap into things that I would never have tapped into in a million years had I not had Dan in my life.
Oh, his vitality, he just doesn't stop.
He's like really nice and friendly and he's easy to get along with.
Like the old British paints commercial, he just keeps on keeping on.
He has taught me patience.
Gives me a bit of a kick in the butt when I'm feeling a bit down, and like, you know, you can get through it and stuff. So Dan's given me, sort of just taught me, I guess, just living in the moment and kind of trying to find joy in the little things and stuff like that. So not to get wrapped up in my own head too much.
It's very simple, but I just really like when Dan smiles at me.
Wicked sense of humour, patience, kindness, and humility.
The best thing about Dan is his popping.
What do you like about Daniel Mitty?
The best hugs.
So that's just some of the people in Dan's life. And I think everyone on Dan's microboard gets something from being on his microboard, and they're able to talk about that very passionately, actually. Person-centered thinking, which is about understanding persons' likes and dislikes, I'll talk about in a sec, can also help people to plan the things they might want to contribute in their relationships. So reciprocal relationship means microboards also support the focused person to find out what they want to give to others in their personal relationships or in their community. So, for example, Dan actually loves little kids. And one of the things he does is collect plastic containers for his local daycare centre to use in craft activities. And he delivers them regularly, and he's developed a relationship with his local daycare centre. They know Dan, and they know that Dan likes to help. My son Eli is a bit passionate about plungers and plugs. And so when he gets a new neighbour in his street, he likes to go and buy them a gift from Bunnings. So he'll go and buy them a plunger and some spare plugs, and he'll go and knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm Eli, and I bought these things for you," as a way to introduce himself. And that's resulted in some cool things. One of his neighbours started bringing fruit over after he'd done that, and they've built a sense of, more of a sense of belonging in his street. Usually members of microboards include the person in their own networks if that's appropriate and there's an interest in doing that. So everyone's busy, no one's got time. We're not asking microboard members necessarily to go out of their way, but we do say, have a think about things you do in your life and groups of people you already engage with that the focus person might be interested in exploring as well. And we can kind of leverage the social networks of microboard members in that way. This is Eli and Coral. Coral was one of Eli's first microboard members. She's pretty passionate about local footy, and she was going to the Bayswater Footy Club every Saturday, and she said, "I wonder if Eli'd like to come along." And so he started going. He hadn't had much to do with footy before that, but he's actually developed a great love of the football and got to know everyone at the club from just going with Coral, and he still gets included now in the club social events and their wind-ups, and people know him, and he's kind of part of that crew. So Coral didn't go out of her way and do anything different. Eli had a support worker going along with him to provide his supports, but she's been like not the gatekeeper, but that person that's helped to facilitate his inclusion and getting to know a broader network of people. Person-centered thinking and planning is something that we talk about a lot, and it's a very important thing that microboards do in terms of getting to know the person, their likes, their dislikes, their needs, interests, strengths, values, their identity, their dreams and wishes, and their fears. This is core business for microboards because it underpins everything that they do, whether it's relationship support, planning, or supporting self-determination. Where people have limited interests or little is known about their interests, we find that microboard members can help by sharing their interests with the person. So we've supported people that have very limited, narrow interest in music, for example, and sometimes adults have a interest in stuff from early childhood, and that's okay. But we've found that they've been able to expand their taste in music by spending time with microboard members who share their favourite music with them. If you think about it, most of us develop our interests as a result of and through our relationships with others. So microboards can play an important role in helping a person to get to know themselves better as well. Person-centered thinking and planning can really help to make plans in the person's life. This is a very old document. I think it's like 17 years old. Eli was still at school, and we'd built a circle of friends around Eli with some of the kids from the school that he went to. He ended up going to a mainstream school. We found a little community school that was up for doing it. Not many other people were at the time. And a planning session was facilitated. And what was really interesting was the way that his peers saw things. So at the time, Eli had very destructive behaviours around technology. So he used to break it. Computers, TVs, video cassette players, all of that cassette players still had retro stuff around back then. He would smash that stuff up. It was a real problem. His peers, however, turned that on its head and said he's really interested in dismantling things. And he's very good at it too. And so when they were planning for him to leave school, someone had the idea of, well, maybe he'd like to do some computer recycling. And sure enough, we found a place that Eli could go and start to learn how to take computers apart. He was never able to do that independently. He needed a supporter, but he learned to do some parts of it, and he loved it so much and got so much from it. And then he stopped trying to break technology shortly after that, because what we saw as being a challenging behaviour was just an expression of a real interest and passion that he had. And that's the power of being person-centered. Person-centeredness requires us to see the person through a positive lens, and that can really open up some different ways of doing things. Also means that we've got permission to focus on doing things in ways that bring connection and pleasure and joy. Lastly, before I'll hand you over to Eva for a story about Dan, is self-determination. And this is really important part of what we do as well. So noticing a person's preferences, of course, is part of that. That's foundational to supporting decision-making. Microboards will also work to provide tailored communication and supported decision-making tools and strategies. So big part of what we do is providing education to microboard members about how to support decisions. And that might include lots of different tools like using talking mats or visuals or rating scales or whatever's going to work for the person. But we have quite extensive practice knowledge about that, and we spend quite a bit of time supporting microboards to know how to support the person's self-determination. Of course, we all engage in supported decision-making, so this isn't, a disability-specific thing. It's something that we all do. It's just that for people with disabilities, sometimes we need an intentional process to make sure that we're supporting them to make decisions. One of the things that is in every microboard constitution is that the microboard's role is to make sure that the focus person is having the same opportunities as another person of the same age and background typically would have, and has the opportunity to make the same kinds of decisions. Quick story about Dan. Dan is probably never going to be able to drive a car, maybe with driverless vehicles, but he's not interested in driverless vehicles. He actually wants to drive a car. It's unlikely he'll be able to. For a lot of people like Dan, car ownership gets taken off the table because he wouldn't be able to drive a car. But Dan's Microboard thought about it, and other young fellas of Dan's age were getting to buy their own car. And sure enough, when they asked Dan, Dan wanted to buy his own car too. It was actually really important for him. So the Microboard supported Dan to figure out, financially how that would happen. There's a whole story to it that I won't go into now. But for Dan, his sense of empowerment in his life, but also his sense of identity as a young Aussie fella, owning his own car, choosing what car he buys has been really, really important to him. That's been an important component of the Microboard and what the Microboard does. So if you haven't already started thinking about supporting decision making for your young person, some of the things we do when we're starting out with Microboards is firstly just to make sure everyone understands that everyone can make decisions and choices regardless of the kind of disability that they have. They can't necessarily make all decisions and choices, but they can make some. Everyone can. We often do decision mapping. So we ask people to start out by actually mapping out noticing all the decisions that person makes across their week. And that can give real insight to a person's decision-making strengths and also their support needs, as well as raising awareness of areas of life where decisions are not being made that maybe could be with support. And we could do some planning to increase that person's agency in those areas. Anyway, enough of me. Eva's going to talk about some of the things that Dan's Microboard did with him when he was in the process of leaving school. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you, Jaquie. Okay, so as I said already, I'm a Microboard member. I've been one for, about 16, 17 years. The Microboard I'm on is called DTMC, which stands for Dan Demands Clan. We are in our 15th year of incorporation. We had our 14th AGM in December last year. We meet monthly. And then in between meetings, we do little things and jobs. Just to follow up on what Jaquie was saying about, the struggle of asking people to do things and, the parents worrying about that. I can share that as a Microboard member. I always had a struggle of feeling like I'm not doing enough. Always feeling like, maybe I should be more proactive. And I've asked Jo, Dan's mom, quite often, can I do anything else? And, she was very clear that it was enough what I was doing. So, it is kind of two-way thing. And most people, when we care about someone, we just want to do things for them. And we enjoy doing that and we get satisfaction from it. In a Microboard, the person at the center is at the center. So in our case, Dan is at the center, and it doesn't mean that he has to be at every meeting. He has to make every decision, and we always look up to him. Him being at the center means that we are tuned into what he needs and what he wants. And sometimes that may mean that he doesn't want to be at the meeting. Like currently, we're doing some very boring bureaucratic stuff that needs to happen. Dan is aware of it, and he chooses not to be part of it. So every second meeting, we're going to have it online, and we just do the boring stuff, and Dan actually doesn't want to join us. That was something that he decided to do at one of the meetings when we've discussed that. So this is how Dan is at the center. He actually does what he needs to do, and we just make sure that we know what he wants, and then we follow the lead. Next one, Jaquie. So we are very connected with Dan, so it's not just down to the coming to the monthly meetings and doing the jobs as the DTMC members. We also stay in touch with Dan in our own ways. So we sometimes come and visit him. That is planned, sometimes it's unplanned. I would quite often drive by and just feel, oh, okay, be nice to pop in. And if Dan is home, that's great. If he's not, well, that's okay. We do organize social get-togethers, mostly for reason, be it a birthday party, Christmas party, or busy bee. But this is where we actually meet together as a group of Microboard members, extended to the dance support workers and any friends or family that wants to join us. Sometimes through those meetings, we get things done as they need to be done. And sometimes Dan comes and visits us, or we do things away from home, just somewhere at the foreshore, or go somewhere together. Really what that gives is not just a connection for Dan, is also a connection for us. So we have each other as a group. There's other Microboard members who benefit from being on a Microboard. We had one Microboard member on Dan's Microboard who said, if it wasn't for Dan's Microboard, I may not have been here. So, she was going through a very difficult time in her life, and actually becoming part of this board meant a lot to her. For me, professionally, it was just amazing to be on the Microboard and actually doing things and being aware that it's possible. So the belief, Dan's given me belief to do my job properly. And I will talk about it a bit more in a minute. So next one, Jaquie. So how we started, it was in 2009. So the Disability Services Commission brought people in from all over the world to do presentations for the employees as well as for the families in the local area. And as Jaquie said, there was some connection with Vela Microboard. And what happened, Dan's mom actually went in 2009 to Canada and met the families there, and actually saw what is possible, what can happen for people with disabilities and their families and their close ones. And she came back feeling like, wow, there's the whole thing that I never knew about that actually can be done. When she came back home, it was the time when Dan was just about to leave school. They needed to think about, okay, what next? His days were filled with going to school. What's going to happen now? And at that time, she was told, and Dan was told, that there's not much for him there after school, that not much can be done. And Joe, coming back from Canada, felt that there must be something. There must be other options. We just need to find them, and I need to find people who believe in it. So the beginning was actually clarifying what it is that we're going to be seeking for Dan, with Dan. And that's called vision. Jaquie already mentioned vision. And Jo was very happy for me to say that initially she thought, oh, there's some kind of airy-fairy, funny word, buzzword that actually doesn't mean much. She kind of couldn't get her head around it. But as I said, she started with the belief that maybe we need to look into it. And then she actually found some people who helped her to clarify what that vision may be. And those people, as Jaquie said, quite often that's the case, happened to be her friends. So she had a small group of women that felt passionate about what she was passionate about and wanted to be there for her and for Dan. So we were listening to Jo, we were asking questions, and we helped to clarify, to remember some of the things that she was thinking about for Dan, but she may have forgotten, and then put it all together and then record it, which Jo did. So she's actually written the vision for Dan, and that vision still exists, and we've ticked quite a few of those boxes, and there's some that we're still working on and hopefully get there at some point in time. Now, what needed to happen next, once we had that vision, was to actually start working on it and achieving it. So what we did is we decided that as we are a group of, middle-aged women, we may need some support from people who are a bit closer to Dan, and to help us actually to think about what are the dreams of a young people. Where do we start with those dreams? So because Jo was the mum, we thought that maybe it's not a good idea to have mum in the room, because that puts a bit of a different slant on things. So us, the DTMC members, took over the organization of the events with the young people and facilitation of those events. We actually, one of us had a connection with a great facilitator who we employed. And then we knew of Dan's friends. There were some family members as well, and our friends' kids. So we've invited different people and we started to do the planning sessions for Dan. So we started with planning for everyone. So because there was a lot of young people Dan's age who had the same kind of, were at the same stage in their life, we thought, let's ask them what they want from their life, what they're going, what is the next step. So they started talking about themselves and about their dreams, and they started sharing their plans for the future. And then we moved on to, okay, what about Dan? Where do you see him? You know him well. What could his future be? What goals could he have? So we did a lot of drawing, talking, recording, again, in a facilitated way. And people came up with some amazing ideas that we never thought about. From being a postman through to, being a racing car driver, because they all knew Dan loved cars. So there's a lot of things, and a lot of them weren't restricted by, I don't know, assumptions, life experience, and all those things. They just saw Dan as Dan. And we, after that big session, we kind of moved on to the smaller sessions with smaller groups of people, trying to tease out a bit more what they meant by, making those bigger statements of, a car racing driver, for example, why, and how we can actually make it work in a slightly different way. Next one, Jaquie. So once we had some of those ideas, and not just from those sessions, but also our own ideas as a DTMC members and the older folks that knew Dan, we went to school and we had this individual educational planning, it's called. So we met with Dan's teachers, his teacher's aide, and Dan's mom, and then some of the Microboard members joined her there as well. And we started having conversations about, okay, what can be done? Dan is in his last year of school. How can we actually prepare him to leave school? And he was very lucky because he had amazing teacher's aide who was really into it, really understood it, and worked with us together, trying to explore the options. So he not only had some ideas and helped us to map out, what we can do, he also went out with Dan every week and tried those ideas. And what was very important here was that, he could really, first of all, he believed that it's possible. Dan can hold a job, he can actually have a life outside of school. He also was very good at observing what Dan likes and who is actually interested in Dan, to make those connections and to actually get deeper into understanding what Dan can offer and what Dan can enjoy through working, be it voluntary to start with and paid employment for sure. Dan doesn't communicate through words. He uses a communication device. At that time, he didn't have one. So there was a lot of work and error and trying to really make sure that actually we're doing what Dan agrees with. So we're doing the best we could to achieve that. And then, once he was trying it out, then that was coming back through Jo to DTMC, and we kept talking about what is possible and what Dan is enjoying, what he's not, and who is there in the community that he's connecting with. From that, we moved to looking for jobs. So because the dance microboard members was a local group of people, we all were connected. So we all, based on the knowledge of Dan experiencing things in the community, getting the feedback from what's happening there, from us knowing Dan, and then from us knowing the people in the community, we started coming up with ideas. We had over 100 ideas, I think, of, what could happen. And, it's a lot of brainstorming. We did reach out to people that we knew. We, emailed them, called them. Then through that, we had some meetings. We would go with Jo. She went to probably all of the meetings, but then the various DTMC members would join her at those meetings, and we discussed it further. And then we just were trying to find something that would match Dan's interest, and then somewhere where people would actually welcome Dan and give it a go. So one of those ideas was a connection we had with someone at Curtin. So it was a person who was a director at the Disability Services Commission who then moved to actually work at Curtin. And a couple of us had a connection with him, especially one of the Microboard members. So she's actually reached out to him. We reached out to him because we actually knew that he had right values and that he would probably get it, but also because he was quite high up at Curtin and he had some pull there and maybe he could help us out. So we've emailed him and then we've met with him and he understood what we wanted. And then he said, leave it with me. And he went away. And then 9 months later, he emailed us saying, guys, I think I got it. I'm very excited. So we met, and what happened, his department at Curtin was really doing badly at recycling. So they all had quotas that they had to meet with their recycling, and they were terrible. They really weren't getting it. So he said, I think Dan could help us with this. And we said, okay, yeah, let's try and give it a go. And Dan went and he tried it and it really worked for him. So he started working for Curtin and he's employed there still many years later. And I tell you a bit more about the experience throughout there in a minute. But from the Curtin University, there was other jobs that also happened from Dan. And, he did some volunteering as well, which we're hoping that it will come to something more paid, but that didn't work out. So he just, did jobs like resource development, he got paid for, consultations for projects he got paid for, and the presentations that he gets paid for. At Curtin, Jaquie, go to the next one. What happened is he actually went through stages, like I think we all do. So first of all, it worked out very well. He did a bit of volunteering. Then actually they decided, okay, we can pay you because you're actually doing an amazing job. We want you to help us more. And then at some point he started having a doubt, and we knew it because he stopped doing the job. He was filling in 3 baskets, which was very little. And we decided, okay, we need to look into it. So we had a chat, and his mom had a chat to him and said, hey, Dan, what's happening? How, you're not liking it. We think you need to help us to understand. But look, this is why you liked the job. And she went through why he liked this job. And she said, go another 2 times. If you still don't like it, just don't do it and we will know. If you like it, then you let us know. Dan had a thought about it, had a thing about it. And the following week he went to work and he filled in 7 baskets. The following week he did 15 baskets. And we knew he thought about it and he actually made a choice. And he stayed in the job. Worked great. Another issue came up about a year ago where he was doing a great job, but his team changed. And we're struggling to find a good support workers to do this job. And it is hard at the moment. We're still working on it. But what Jo wanted me to say is that DTMC is there. So it's us who follows up with Curtin and lets them know what's happening. It's us who holds the idea, and we know that once the support worker is in place that can do the job, we're going back, and it's us who will be following up with the Curtin and making it all happen. So that is really a short story about how the DTMC started and how we did one of those things that was important to Dan, which is finding an employment. Over to you, Jaquie.
Thanks, Eva. If I could just have 1 minute to finish up just quickly about how we support microboard development. As I said, we're based on the model in British Columbia, which is this. We're not saying that microboards can be independently sustainable. In British Columbia, they've found that at various times they do need support. And that's why it's important to have a parent organisation whose core work is microboards, because stuff happens. Sometimes people can't find members, or there's some conflict, or the board needs help with planning, or there's a tricky question, or there's the NDIS, or etc. All of the things on the slide there, where our aim is to make Microboards Australia sustainable, to be a sustainable support for the microboards that we support to develop. So there's a place to go if people come across problems. So that's one thing to know. If you're thinking about doing this, choose your time, pace yourself. If you have a young person, you don't have to do it now. All of it, you can do some of it. It's not about getting it done quickly, it's about getting it done well. And just starting to think about and talk about planning for the future can be a really powerful thing to do. If you want us to help you and you want to get a quote, please ask us to help you do the quote. The NDIS require a very detailed, substantial quote for circles of support and microboards now. And we prepare this for you with no charge, but it takes some time. We need to have some conversations with you to prepare that. So let us know if that's something that you'd like. And lastly, just to say, we've talked about some things you can do if you have a young person during the course of this session. And this is just a reminder of some of those things. If you do any of these, they're all really great steps towards the future, whether your future includes a microboard or not. These are some helpful things to do. So that's us. We have a website. You can email Eva. Her address is up there on the right-hand side if you want to ask more questions. And we also have a Facebook page you can connect with if you want to stay up to date with what we get up to. Thank you very much.